Okay, we'll start now. So students, today what we are going to do is we'll discuss the model answers for UPSC question paper of 2024 exam. Because I thought that best way to prepare for UPSC is to find out what can be the best possible or model answer for previous year questions. So just to help the students, because you might have already gone through the previous year question papers, what I am going to do is today 2024 exam question paper, we will discuss and try to find out what will be the model answer. Now, definitely, the question paper, first paper and second paper in philosophy has 4 sections, as you know. And since I will be discussing all the questions, not only 5 per question paper, so it will take some 4 or 5 classes to complete this. So today we will start with section A of first paper, that is Western philosophy. And then if we are able to complete today, then next week we will take up section B, Indian philosophy. Questions basically are 150 words each, 5 alternatives, 5 options, 5 sub questions will be there, 10 marks each. And then from second question onwards, it will be 3 parts, A, B, C. A will be 20 marks, then 15 marks, and then 15 marks. Now, 20 marks question we will have to write in about 300 words. 15 marks question we may write about 200 to 225 words. So this will be our this thing. So now, without spending this, because this you might have already seen. So now let us start. What is the question? What are the questions and what can be the model answers? Let us try to discuss that. Now, but before I go to that, I just want to tell you what, because I have already given in earlier lectures, what will be included in model answers. Now, since this is a typed version of this thing, so wherever important words and phrases are there, I have made it bold so that when you are appearing in the exam or giving practice tests, you can underline those words and phrases because that is very important. And second thing is the handwriting should be very, very legible, because while we are discussing this typed thing, it will not be clear. But once you are handwritten answers are there, this question is very, very valid, because whether it is legible, whether it is neatly written, whether anybody can easily read. Because in earlier lectures, I have very clearly told that any examiner will not make effort to make out what you have written. It should be easily legible and ascertainable by him. Then only he will proceed with reading that and then assessing that how you have written. Now, second thing, your directive of the question has to be strictly followed. Now, if you are missing the directive, you are going to lose the marks. And you will see how we have followed in model answers the directives, because this is very, very important. Whatever is asked, you have to answer that. You cannot write everything what you know about that topic, because then you are going to miss the marks definitely. Then you have to definitely quote the references. References may be several books, etc., then several philosophers, then quotes. So all those things you have to mention. And after exposition of the idea or doctrine, you have to critically evaluate also in almost most of the uh, questions. I mean, we will also tell, because in some questions there may not be any scope, so we will not do it. But in some, there will be more scope, 60-40, 60 exposition, 40 critical evaluation. In some, we will do 75-25, 70-30. And in some, there will not be any critical evaluation. So that also we'll try to tell in this. So because that is also important. So now let us start, because all these things will become clear as and when we proceed. So now let us try to start from the first question itself. Now, first question A, the question is, if you see, it's differentiate between Plato's and Aristotle's conception of form. Now, this is the question we have to write in 150 words. Now, you see, the directive of the question is, you have to straightaway differentiate between Plato's and Aristotle's conception of form. You cannot write anything else. If you are going to write anything else, you are going to lose marks, because then examiner will understand that you don't know the thing and you are trying to cover up the whole answer. So this is very important. Directive we have to understand, and accordingly we have to write the answer. So now let us see how we are trying to differentiate between conceptions of forms of Plato as well as Aristotle. Plato and Aristotle, though foundational figures in Western philosophy, diverge fundamentally on the nature of form, reflecting the shift from metaphysical transcendence to empirical eminence. Now, metaphysical transcendence is for Plato, and empirical eminence is for Aristotle. Now, see, the use of words and phrases are also very important, which will give some reflection that you know the subject deeply or you understand the philosophy. So I keep on telling to the students that you have to have a notebook, digital or physical, in which all the words and phrases you have to write, and then accordingly you have to use, also understand and use in writing the different answers. So you see here, the first paragraph itself, direct hitting the question, bullseye. So we are not deviating from the directive. We are straightway in first paragraph itself, we are summarizing the whole idea. What is the difference between two philosophers as far as conception of form is concerned? Now, then next two paragraphs we will try to, in one paragraph we will try to explain Plato's idea, in another paragraph we will try to explain Aristotle's idea, and then finally we will try to conclude. In conclusion, again we will try to emphasize the same thing. So Plato in Republic, Phaedo, and Parmenides. So these are his books. So this is again very important. We are quoting here, holds that forms are eternal, immutable, and perfect universals, existing in an independent realm of forms, topos, korenos. Now these are Greek words are being used here. So I keep on telling that also, wherever in Western philosophy, maybe Greek or Roman words can be used, or English words can be used. Wherever in Indian philosophy or writing, Sanskrit words also should be used, because just this will give originality to your answer. Sensible objects are mere imperfect copies participating in archetypes like beauty or justice. Now, these are again Greek words. Now, some you may remember, some you may not remember. That also is there. So, whatever you remember, you write. Whatever you don't remember, don't worry, because that will make difference in very good answers, basically. So, even if you don't miss some, it doesn't matter. But whatever you remember, you please do write. Now, this creates strict dualism between being and becoming, privileging knowledge of unchanging realities over appearances. So now this is the conception of Plato. Now Aristotle, on the other hand, particularly in metaphysics, it is his book, Aristotle's book, rejects this separation. His doctrine, hylomorphism, now this is doctrine of Aristotle, asserts that every substance is a composite of matter and form, hyl and morphe. So that is what is called hylomorphism. Form is the immanent principle of actuality, defining the essence and the teleological purpose of a thing. Unlike Plato's abstract universals, Aristotle's form is embedded within empirical substances. So this is what we have described as Aristotle's. And in that also we have tried to link how it differs from Plato's. Now, thus Plato's form is a transcendent metaphysical archetype, whereas Aristotle's form is intrinsic, actualizing essence of concrete reality. Now, this completes this answer. Now, you may be seeing that in this answer particularly, we have not used any critical evaluation line or even paragraph or anything, because as you know, this is 150 words, so very less number of words are available. Secondly, the directive itself says differentiate between. So it's not saying that critically evaluate or discuss, because discuss also gives some scope basically. But so here it's differentiate. You have to simply straightaway differentiate, and you cannot simply go beyond that directive. If you are going beyond that directive, you are wasting some words in some other things which is not asked actually. And then you are going to land in a problem whereby you will definitely receive or get lesser marks. Now, B part of the same question, how does Kant respond to Hume's skepticism with regard to a priori judgments? Discuss. Now here discuss word is there. Now see, discuss doesn't mean that you waste a number of words in critical evaluation. Maximum 1 line, 2 line, because here 150 words are only marked for this. So maximum 1 sentence or 2 sentences you can write, which may be critical evaluation, which may be comparative statement, or something which is related to the directive. But it cannot be beyond that. So let us see now what we will do, because the question is, how does Kant responds to Hume's skepticism with regard to a priori judgments? This is very specific question. So what is Hume's skepticism with regard to a priori judgments and how Kant responds to that? So this is what at all we have to discuss. Now, Hume in a treatise of human nature. Now, again, we have written his book, questioned the necessity of judgments like causality, reducing them to habitual associations of constant conjunction, undermining the conditions for the possibility of experience. So this is Kant's view on a priori categories. Now he introduces the concept of synthetic a priori judgments. Now this is introduced by Kant, which are necessarily true at extent knowledge. For example, every event has a cause, is not learned from experience, but is necessary organizing principle of cognition, essential for coherent experience of phenomena. Thus, now, after describing Kant's response to Hume's idea, now we'll try to bring some conclusion or concluding remarks, or and in that we will also try to include 1 or 2 lines for critical evaluation or criticism of Kant's view also. Now let us see that. Thus, Kant transcends Hume's skepticism by grounding objective knowledge in the a priori forms of sensibility, that is space and time, and categories of understanding. Though critics like Schopenhauer and Quine. Now, Schopenhauer on the unknowability of the nomina and Quine challenging the analytic synthetic distinction in 2 dogmas of empiricism have questioned its completeness. So now this paragraph basically not only concludes the Kant's view, but also briefly mentions that there are some objections to Kant's view also by subsequent philosophers, Schopenhauer or Quine, others also. So this makes the answer complete. And this why we have written it, because the directive says discuss. So first we have discussed the exposition, what is Kant's response to Hume, and then we have told that Kant's view also has been criticized by the philosophers. So this completes the question. Now let us see next. See, what arguments are offered by Moore to prove that there are certain truisms, knowledge of which is a matter of common sense, critically discussed. Now here directive, please see, critically discussed, which means about 40%, 30 to 40% of the number of words we have to spend in critical evaluation straight away, because here specifically it is being asked critically discussed. So first 60% we will give the exposition of what is being asked, and then next 40% critical evaluation, which will include brief conclusion also. So G. Moore in a defense of common sense. Now, defense of common sense in his book argues that certain truisms such as the earth existed before I was born, or other minds exist, are self-evident pieces of common sense knowledge. His core argument rests on direct realism, holding that ordinary perceptual experiences provide direct knowledge of the external world. In Proof of the External World, another book of Moore, Moore represents his famous demonstration. Here is one hand, here is another. Therefore, an external world exists. So this is his demonstration. He asserts that certainly of such empirical propositions certainty of such empirical propositions outweighs skeptical hypothesis posed by philosophers like Descartes and Hume. So he has basically given a clarity that this can be proved by common sense. Now, this is exposition. But in exposition also, we have mentioned, you see, Descartes and Hume views have been mentioned. Then Hume's views have anyway in detail have been mentioned. His books have been referred. Then his statements have been referred. So all this makes his exposition quite complete. Now, since it is critically discussed or critically evaluated, so now second paragraph will be definitely a critical evaluation of the whole thing. However, critics argue Moore merely asserts rather than justifies these certainties. Now, first we have Wittgenstein. Uncertainty, again, its book of Wittgenstein contains that such truisms are hinge propositions, background certainties of language, not epistemic proofs. Then again, other philosophers, A.J. Ayer and logical positivists also continue critique Moore for failing to explain the logical foundations of empirical knowledge. Nonetheless, now, so this is a now critical evaluation, and now we will go to concluding statement. Nonetheless, Moore's defense forms the cornerstone of ordinary language philosophy, later developed by thinkers like J.L. Austin and Gilbert Ryle. So now you see, a number of philosophers have been mentioned, a number of references, books have been given, proper criticism has been given, and then concluding remarks are there. So this makes the question answer complete. Now let us go to next one. Why does later Wittgenstein think that there cannot be a language that only one person can speak, a language that is essentially private? Discuss. Now here we will discuss, so about 70 to 80%, we will go over this exposition, and then we will try to bring some brief critical comments on Wittgenstein's view. Now let us see that. Later Wittgenstein in Philosophical Investigation, now another, this is his book, argues that a language understandable by only one person, referring solely to private sensations, is logically impossible. This is what he has mentioned. This is his view at later period. So his private language argument rests on the idea that meaning is used within the rule governed public practices. So without shared criteria, there is no way to distinguish seems right from is right, rendering a purely private language incoherent. His famous beetle in box analogy illustrates that what is privately in one's mind is irrelevant to how words gain meaning. Language functions through shared practices, not inner reference. So therefore, one man's language is not possible. That's what private language is not possible. This is the view of later Wittgenstein. Now, since it is discussed, so we will briefly bring here the critical evaluation of this whole doctrine, and then try to have some concluding remarks. However, critics like A.J. Ayer argue that Wittgenstein underestimates the role of introspection, while Norman Malcolm, another philosopher, a defender, emphasizes that the PLA does not deny private experiences, but only private meaning. So A.J. Ayer is critic, and Malcolm is one of his supporters, Wittgenstein's supporter. Others like Saul Krippe, he has given Krippenstein's skeptical paradox, argue that Wittgenstein's account of rule following leads to deeper skepticism about meaning itself. Some further caution that Wittgenstein's view risks veering towards behaviorism, downplaying mental phenomena. So now this is again the critical evaluation of Wittgenstein's doctrine. So this completes this question. Now let us go to next one. How does Kierkegaard define truth in terms of subjectivity? Critically discuss. Now here, critically discuss means about 40% straight away we have to put it for critical evaluation. How does Kierkegaard define truth in terms of subjectivity? Now, Soren Kierkegaard, in concluding unscientific postscript. So this is his book, defines truth as subjectivity, asserting that truth in existential matters lies not in objective correspondence, but in one's authentic inward relation to beliefs. He distinguishes objective truth from subjective truth, which concerns the passionate appropriation of meaning in one's existence. For Kierkegaard, matters like faith demand a leap beyond reason, where certainty is replaced by committed subjectivity. Truth becomes a lived experience, echoing his rejection of Hegelian systematization and abstract rationalism. Now, this is exposition of Kierkegaard's view regarding subjectivity. Now, since the question itself asked critically discuss, so now we'll have to critically evaluate the whole view. However, critics like Bertrand Russell dismiss Kierkegaard's view as irrationalist, reducing truth to subjectivity, sincerity, to subjective sincerity. Logical positivists like A.J. Ayer reject it for lacking verifiability. Others argue it risks relativism, where personal conviction overrides rational standards. Karl Jaspers, now he's another philosopher who defends actually Kierkegaard. He defends Kierkegaard, emphasizing that existential truth requires subjective commitment but does not negate objective truth in empirical domains. Thinkers like Martin Heidegger, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Gabriel Marcel secularize or reinterpret subjectivity within broader existential framework. Now you will see, I mean, in last two questions, see, we are in critical evaluation. We are very balanced in critical evaluation. I mean, on the one side, if negative points are there, which has been raised by some philosopher, we are quoting that. But then there are some positive points also, or some supporters also. That also we are quoting. So that is called balanced kind of critical evaluation. So that you should also know, because it should not be one-sided. If some supporters are there, or some other philosophers have built their further ideas on their basis of the existing philosophy, so that also needs to be mentioned. So that's what we have done. So this makes the answer complete, and it makes the answer balanced also. We are not one-sidedly criticizing the exposition of some or the other philosopher. Now we'll go to second question. Now, second question, part A, as you know, it's 20 marks, and it is 300 words we have to write basically. So here, now whenever you write in 300 words, you are going to get definitely some scope for, I mean, critical evaluation, or even extended idea of exposition. Now, but you should also know that usually these 300 words questions or 20 marks questions have 2 or 3 parts also in many places. So each part, whatever is asked, should be accordingly addressed in the answer. It should not be that answer should be one-sided or covering only one part. So then again, you are not going to get better marks. So this again, another thing I just want to say, 1 or 2 students were asking in my earlier lectures. Now, some coachings or some classes, they suggest going for diagrams, or going for tables, or going for numberings. So see, best answer will be if written in small, smooth paragraphs, transition from one paragraph to other, because as you know, number of words are not more. So, and this is not the test of your drawing skill or mathematics. It's basically the test of your language or writing skill, basically, how you can express the answer in those number of words. So best answer is always written in small paragraphs, transition from one paragraph to other in a very smooth manner, right from introduction till conclusion. So if you can write that, that is best. However, in some questions, there may be some scope of diagram or some table or some, so there you may try, but again, I will caution you, it should not look as a forced kind of thing, because if it is a forced diagram or forced table or forced sketch, you are not going to get good marks, and you are wasting time also in doing that. So best will be write in small paragraphs, and do underline the important words and phrases in very, very clear terms, because then Examiner will be able to read that, he will be able to understand that you know it better, and accordingly he will evaluate your answer. So that's what I just want to clarify. Yes, in some questions, diagrams or tables, etc., may be required wherever it is essential. Please do put that. But in most of the questions in philosophy, and I teach ethics also, in ethics, it's not required. So therefore, we have to be very, very careful that we are not doing something which is very forced in nature. Now we'll go to second question, part A. Is rejection of Locke's notion of primary qualities instrumental in Berkeley's leaning toward idealism? In this context, also discuss how Berkeley's subjective idealism is different from the absolute idealism proposed by Hegel. Now, see, this question is already having two parts. Now, first part is how, uh, I mean, whether rejection of Locke's notion of primary quality is instrumental in Berkeley's leaning towards idealism, and second, how Berkeley's subjective idealism is different from absolute idealism proposed by Hegel. So these two parts we have to definitely write in a very, very clear demarcation, and accordingly we'll get the better marks also if we are able to express. So now let us try. Berkeley's rejection of Locke's primary secondary distinction is pivotal to his shift towards subjective idealism. Locke argued that primary qualities, that is extension, figure, motion, exist objectively, while secondary qualities, color, taste, are mind dependent. So this is the Locke's idea: primary qualities and secondary qualities. Now, what Berkeley did? Berkeley, influenced by Descartes' representationalism, critiques this, arguing that even primary qualities vary with perception. Size changes with distance, motion with reference to frames. Thus, both are mind dependent. So Berkeley said, no, both primary and secondary, both are mind dependent. So this is what Berkeley's idea, collapsing the basis of Lockean empiricism. Now, this leads directly to Berkeley's axiom, S est percipi. So this you might be already knowing, to be is to be perceived. Now, if unperceived matter ceases to exist, to prevent solipsism, Berkeley invokes God as the universal perceiver, ensuring continuity of existence. Now, this forms the core of his immaterialism, as articulated in a treatise concerning the principles of human knowledge. Now, this is his book, so this also has been referred. So now you see, now this completes the first part of question. Now we'll go to second part, that how Berkeley's subjective idealism is different from Hegel's absolute idealism. Now, in contrast, Hegel's absolute idealism developed in, now this is again his book, Phenomenology of Spirit, transcends Berkeley's model. Influenced by Kant's transcendental idealism, Hegel rejects mind-dependent reality and proposes the absolute spirit. This is Hegel's proposal, as a self-unfolding rational process through dialectics, that is thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Reality for Hegel is the historical manifestation of reason not dependent on finite minds. So this is Hegel's idea of absolute idealism. Now, since there is a discuss, I mean, what is discuss given? Discuss. So now, since discuss is here, so therefore we have to briefly critically evaluate. We cannot spend more cannot give more weightage to critical evaluation, but definitely 20 to 30% or 20 to 25% space has to be given for that. So now accordingly, now you see, critics like Butt and Russell dismiss Berkeley's idealism as reducing reality to perception. Others like G. Moore argue against Berkeley's denial of material substance. Similarly, Hegel faces criticism from Karl Popper, who labels his system as historicist determinism. So you see, here we have briefly included the criticism of not only Berkeley but Hegel also, because in second part discuss word has been written. So second part we are critically evaluating. Now, despite differing trajectories, both reject Lockean materialism. Both. Who? Hegel as well as Berkeley. Berkeley via theological subjectivism and Hegel via rational metaphysics and historical holism. Now this completes the answer. Now let us go to second B part. Now B part, as you know, is 15 marks question and it has to be written in 220 or 225 words. So how does Spinoza establish that God alone is absolutely real with his statement, whatever is in God? Now whatever is in God is a statement from Spinoza. And we have to critically discuss this. So now critical discuss means we have to 40% weightage have to be given for critical evaluation and 60% for exposition. So accordingly, now let us see. Baruch Spinoza in Ethics, Ethics is his book, asserts whatever is in God. So this is a statement by Baruch Spinoza given in his book called Ethics, articulating his doctrine of substance monism. This is doctrine. For Spinoza, God or nature is the only substance self-caused, infinite, and necessarily existing. All finite beings are mere modes, expressions of God's attributes, chiefly thought and extension. Reality itself is immanent, unfolding of the divine essence. Nothing exists outside God. So now this is basically Spinoza's doctrine. Now let us further elaborate this. Spinoza argues that a true substance must be self-subsistent, requiring nothing external for its existence or conception. Finite things are contingent and dependent. Only God, possessing infinite attributes, qualifies as having absolute reality. So this is again important. Hence, whatever is in God signifies that cosmos is not a creation apart, but the necessary manifestation of God's being. So this is the main explanation of the statement, whatever is in God. So now this completes the main exposition in about 60% words. Now we'll go to critical evaluation. However, critics challenge this. Leibniz himself accuses Spinoza of acosmism, denying the independent reality of the world. Another critic, Hegel, though admiring Spinoza's logical rigor, criticizes it as an undifferentiated unity. And he has given a famous statement, Hegel's statement, night in which all cows are black. So this is the statement of Hegel for Spinoza's undifferentiated unity. Another third critic, Bertrand Russell, dismisses it as a logical cathedral built on untenable metaphysics. Then other philosophers, J.S. Mill and existentialists, raise ethical concerns over the annihilation of human freedom because Spinoza's system does not allow human freedom or free will. So therefore, there are ethical considerations. Yet, now, as I told, our criticism or critical evaluation has to be balanced. So on the one hand, yes, you tell who are the critics and what they have said and how it's criticized. On the other hand, if there are some supporters also or admirers also, that also you need to mention. So now accordingly, yet admirers like Albert Einstein celebrate Spinoza's God as a rational, lawful cosmos. So you see, both sides we have written. And then finally, concluding remarks. Despite critiques, Spinoza's metaphysics remains a monumental attempt to unify God, nature, and existence into a single rational unity. Now, we'll go to C part of the second question. This again have to be 15 marks question, so it has to be answered in 225 words. And the question is, critically examine Kant's objections against the ontological argument for the existence of God. So, see, first thing, what is ontological existence of God? Ontological argument for existence of God. Then second, what is Kant's criticism? And third, the Kant's criticism itself has to be critically evaluated. So there are basically these, this is the directive of the question. So now let us see how we are going to do that. Immanuel Kant's critique of ontological argument delivers a decisive blow to the claim that God's existence can be deduced purely from reason. The argument formulated by St. Anselm of Canterbury and later refined by Descartes holds that God, defined as a supremely perfect being, must exist, since existence is treated as a necessary predicate of perfection. So now this is basically in brief the ontological argument. And here in this, you see, we have not described the ontological argument as such, because that is not the directive of the question. Directive of the question is, what is the Kant's criticism of ontological argument? So in first paragraph also we have mentioned, indirectly Kant's criticism of ontological argument and briefly mentioned the ontological argument, so that in next paragraphs we can develop the whole idea. So now we'll go to next. Now, Kant's central objection in the Critique of Pure Reason, now Critique of Pure Reason is his book, is that existence is not a real predicate. Predicates enrich a concept with descriptive content like omniscience or omnipotence. Existence merely asserts instantiation without adding to the concept itself. His famous example, this is Kant's example, 100 real thalers do not contain more than 100 possible thalers. So this is what he has told. Demonstrate that existence does not augment conceptual content. Thus, one cannot define anything, including God, into existence. So by definition, existence cannot be inferred. This is what Kant's idea and criticism. Now, let us see what are the critical evaluation of Kant's idea. However, critics argue that Kant overlooks the distinction between contingent and necessary existence. Thinkers like Hartstone, Norman Malcolm, Elvin Pretinga argue that necessary existence is embedded in very concept of God, especially within modal ontological arguments. Similarly, Gödel's ontological proof attempts to formalize this via mathematical logic, while E.J. Lowy questions Kant's rigid separation of conceptual analysis and metaphysical necessity. So basically, these are severe critiques of Kant's criticism of ontological arguments. Despite such responses, Kant's critique remains the most enduring refutation of classical ontological reasoning, contributing fundamentally to the collapse of rationalist metaphysics in post-Kantian philosophy. So Kant's criticism is very, very strong, and it has a great impact on subsequent philosophers. Now we'll go to third question. Now third, again, part A, 300 words and 20 marks. So this is 20 marks question and 300 words. Explain Russell's notion of incomplete symbols. Also explain how this notion leads to doctrine of logical atomism. So now, as you know, now the question has clearly two parts. First, we have to explain notion of complete symbols, incomplete symbols. And second, how this notion leads to doctrine of logical atomism. And since the here directive is explain, so explain means, though not directly, or we can spend more number of lines or sentences for critical analysis or evaluation, but still definitely 2-3 sentences can definitely be there. So that we'll see, let us see whether it's possible or not. But directive is very, very clear. Explain. So you have to explain, you have to give the exposition. However, briefly in last para, 1 or 2 lines, or if you can add, that will add some value to the answer. So now let us go. Bertrand Russell's notion of incomplete symbols developed on denoting. On denoting is his book, and Principia Mathematica. This is again his book, refers to expressions that seem to denote entities but lack independent referential meaning. So these are incomplete symbols. Therefore, significance arises only through their role within a proposition's logical structure. For instance, now example he has given, the present king of France is bald, implies existence but contains no real referent. Russell demonstrates through his theory of descriptions that such expressions are logical constructions synthetically useful but ontologically dispensable when fully analyzed into quantificational forms. So this analysis underpins Russell's doctrine of logical atomism. So in first paragraph, we have tried to explain doctrine of incomplete symbols. Now in second paragraph, we are trying to link it to doctrine of logical atomism of Russell. So this analysis underpins Russell's doctrine of logical atomism, which asserts that reality consists of atomic facts mirrored by atomic propositions composed of logically proper names. Incomplete symbols reveal how misleading surface grammar suggests non-existent entities or relations which precise logical analysis dissolves. See, the method affirms that genuine knowledge corresponds to the word's atomic structure with complex propositions reducible to combinations of similar ones. So now here in this paragraph, we are trying to link his incomplete descriptions theory to logical atomism. Now, since the directive is explained, so definitely 2-3 lines, as I told, we will try to critically analyze the whole thing and then we'll try to conclude. Now, critics argued that this framework oversimplifies language and reality. Now, one critic, Strawson, in On Referring, his book On Referring, contends that Russell ignores how ordinary language relies on presuppositions, not strict existential claims. Another critic, Wittgenstein, in Philosophical Investigations, reject atomism, proposing that meaning arises from use within language, not logical form. Then another critic, Quinn, in Two Dogmas of Empiricism, questions the reducibility of statements to atomic components. And then another, Michael Dumet, emphasizes the holistic nature of meaning. So now, this is briefly criticism, and now we'll go to concluding sentence. Nonetheless, Russell's theory remains foundational to analytical philosophy, demonstrating how philosophical clarity arises from uncovering logical form, even if reality does not always fit atomistic models. So now this is important conclusion as far as Russell's atomism is concerned, doctrine of logical atomism. Now we'll go to B. This is a 15 marks question and we have to write in 225 words. Is the sentence all objects are either red or not red meaningful in the same way as this page is white, according to logical positivists? Discuss with arguments. Now, discuss means you have to definitely critically evaluate very briefly, about 25% or 20% words. Now, but before that, we have to explain. According to logical positivists, the sentence "this page is white" is meaningful as it satisfies the verification principle. As you know, logical positivist has given the verification principle, articulated by Moritz Schlick, A.J. Ayer, and Carnap. So these are three main philosophers of who are grouped as logical positivists, and they have given the verification principle. And according to that verification principle, the page is white is meaningful. Its truth can be directly confirmed or falsified through sense experience. So it qualifies as a synthetic a posteriori proposition conveying contingent factual content. So this is meaningful. Now what? Let us go for other sentence. In contrast, all objects are either red or not red is a logical tautology grounded in the law of excluded middle formalized by Aristotle. So now you see here we have quoted various philosophers, their references, right from Aristotle to logical positivists. So this makes your answer strong, basically, philosophically strong. And it reflects deep knowledge of philosophy as expressed in various quotes and various references. Now, for logical positivists, it is an analytic a priori proposition. Analytic a priori proposition. I've already put a video distinguishing analytic a priori and synthetic a posteriori. So there you can, YouTube channel, you can definitely see that. Now this video also we have put in the YouTube channel. So in the same channel, you can see the distinction between analytic a priori and synthetic a posteriori. So now this sentence, that is all objects are either red or not red as per logical positivists, is analytic a priori, and it does not give any additional knowledge. It cannot be verified by empirical testing. So Wittgenstein's Tractus is another his book, similarly treats tautologies as meaningful but devoid of empirical content. So it doesn't contain any empirical content. However, this rigid distinction faces exclusive or decisive critique. Quinn, in Two Dogmas of Empiricism, dismantles the analytic synthetic divide, arguing that even logical truths are embedded in a web of beliefs and revisable if needed. Verification itself presupposes logical systems, making a distinction circular. Another philosopher, Hilary Putnam, further argues that meaning depends on external factors, not just linguistic rules. These critiques expose that the positivist separation between factual and logical meaning is not absolute but a pragmatic convenience, collapsing under deeper philosophical scrutiny, which ultimately contributed to the decline of logical positivism itself. So now this is a fitting conclusion as far as logical positivism theory is concerned. Now we'll go to C. This again 225 words answer and 15 marks question. Among the rationalists, whose account of mind-body problem is compatible with the notion of human freedom and free will? Critically discuss. So critically discuss, as you know, 40% weightage goes to criticism and 60% for the exposition, actual answer. Now, among the rationalists, who are the rationalists? As you know, Descartes, Spinoza, and Leibniz. These three are treated as rationalists. So we have to tell who of the three, whose account of mind-body problem of the three philosophers is more compatible with the notion of human freedom and free will. So accordingly, now answer. Among the rationalists, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz account of mind-body problem most aligns with human freedom and free will. So now this straightway hits the bullseye that yes, Leibniz account of mind-body problem is most compatible with human freedom and free will, though not without contest. Now again, a word of caution has been added here that yes, it is most, but it's not that he has given ample freedom or ample free will. That is also contested. René Descartes' interactionism based on res cogitans and res extensa collapses under the unresolved problem of causal exchange highlighted by Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia. So his Descartes' interactionism is anyway not allowing the freedom or free will. Now Spinoza's parallelism, though elegant, dissolves the mind and body into attributes of the single deterministic substance, reducing freedom to mere understanding of necessity. So Spinoza's concept of parallelism is also not allowing human freedom or free will. Now Leibniz avoids both pitfalls through pre-established harmony, where monads, immaterial windowless entities, operate in perfect synchrony without interaction, scripted by divine decree. Rational monads endowed with perception and appetition act in accordance with their internal principle of reason. Here, freedom becomes rational self-determination, not randomness or metaphysical indeterminacy. So, to some extent, definitely this freedom is or free will is available here. Now, this framework faces decisive critique. So, as I told, his system is also not very perfect as far as human freedom or free will is concerned. So, definitely criticism is there. By anchoring freedom in a divinely fixed order, it arguably preserves only the appearance of autonomy. So Kant, so in Leibniz also it's only appearance of autonomy. And Kant dismisses it as compatibilist formalism, while modern libertarians like Robert Kane and Peter von Ingwan reject it for lacking genuine alternative possibilities. Now, another theory of mind-body, Malebranche's occasionalism, even more fatalistic, collapses causation entirely into divine will. So, there are challenges to Leibniz pre-established harmony also, as has been clearly brought out here. Despite these challenges, Leibniz model remains the most sophisticated rationalist attempt to reconcile metaphysical determinism with rational agencies, offering coherence, if not unqualified freedom. So definitely it's not unqualified freedom, but yes, it's better than Spinoza or Descartes. Now we'll go to question 4. Question 4 again, A part, as you know, is 20 marks question, and we have to answer in about 300 words. Let us go to that. What do the existentialist thinkers mean by the slogan existence precedes essence? How is human existence related to human freedom according to them? Discuss. Now, see, the question has two parts. So, first part is what do existentialist thinkers mean by the slogan existence precedes essence? So, here, if there are 2-3 existentialist thinkers, important thinkers, we have to mention about the views of all the 2-3. And then, second part, how human existence related to human freedom according to them. That we have to mention. And then we have to discuss. Discuss means again 20 to 30% we have to spend for critical evaluation. So then the answer will be complete. Now, existentialist slogan, existence precedes essence, popularized by Jean-Paul Sartre. In his book, Existentialism is a Humanism, asserts that humans are not born with predefined essence. Unlike objects whose essence precedes existence, humans first exist and define themselves through choices and actions. So this is the Sartre's view of existence precedes essence, which is given in his book, Existentialism is a Humanism. Now, this view rejects essentialist metaphysics, including Aristotle's teleology, Aquinas' theological determinism, and Descartes' rationalist essentialism. So this view that existence precedes essence is opposed to essentialist metaphysics, Aristotle's teleology, Aristotle's teleology, Aquinas' teleological determinism, and Descartes' rationalist essentialism is basically subcategories of essentialist metaphysics, if you can say. So this view straightway rejects that essence precedes existence. Here its existence precedes essence. Now let us see what other existentialists say. For Soren Kierkegaard, meaning arises from subjective commitment amid despair and anxiety. Then another existentialist philosopher, Martin Heidegger, in Being and Time, it is his book, emphasized being in the world where humans project themselves into possibilities without inherent essence. So these are mainly three philosophers, Sartre, Kierkegaard, and Heidegger. Now I will go to second part of the question, how the human existence related to human freedom. Existence is inseparable from freedom. The fundamental condition of being human. For Sartre, again, humans are condemned to be free, burdened with absolute responsibility for defining themselves and humanity. Now, another philosopher, Kierkegaard, sees freedom as the source of dread, the anxiety of confronting infinite possibilities. Heidegger ties freedom to authenticity, choosing one's own possibilities rather than conforming to das man. Simon de Beauvoir stresses, and he is another existentialist philosopher, stresses that freedom is always situated, exercised within constraints of gender, history, and embodiment. Denying this responsibility leads to bad faith, where one hides behind social roles, determinism, or self-deception. So basically, in these two paragraphs, if you see, there are 3 or 4 existentialist philosophers, and their views have been, in 1 or 2 sentences, clearly mentioned, directed to the directive of the question. Now, I will go to critical views pertaining to this, because the directive is discuss. So discuss includes not heavy critical evaluation, but definitely brief critical evaluation needs to be done. However, critics argue existentialism overlooks structural constraints. De Beauvoir in the second sex, now it is his book, he is a philosopher, critiques Sartre's abstract freedom by exposing gendered oppression. Then another critic, Herbert Marcuse, contends it ignores how capitalist structures limit autonomy. Then another philosopher, Alasdair MacIntyre, warns it risks subjective relativism with no ethical anchoring. So these are, this is, you can say, critical evaluation of the view. Now the final conclusion. Nevertheless, the slogan "Existence precedes essence" captures the existentialist conviction that freedom is both the burden and meaning of human existence. So now this is a very, very fitting conclusion of the answer, as you can see. Now we'll go to B part, which is a 15 marks question and 225 words. Why does Husserl think that essences exhibit a kind of continuity between consciousness and being? Discuss. Discuss means again 20-25 words percent we have to critically evaluate and then conclude. For Edmund Husserl, essences form the bridge between consciousness and being. So in first sentence itself, directly we are in almost all answers you might have seen in first sentence itself, directly we are hitting the bullseye. We are directly going to the main essence of the crux of the whatever question is being asked. Through eidetic reduction, Husserl seeks the essential structures of phenomena, invariant across experiential variations. And in every answer, I mean, just one more thing I want to tell, the important philosophical terms and phrases have been used elaborately. So this also is making the answers, I mean, quite of high standard. Definitely, while actual, if you maybe are not able to practice that much, you will be able to forgetting some, but with practice, definitely you can remember the terms. And I keep on telling, for every chapter, for every topic, you should have the philosophical terms or phrases written. You understand their meaning and use it, because once you understand, you will be able to understand the notes and the books also properly. And then in practice test, you try to use that, so that in actual exam also you will be able to use. Now, essences are grasped via eidetic intuition, where consciousness imaginatively varies an object to isolate its necessary features. These essences are neither mind-dependent reality entities, as in Plato's realism. So here, we are not only answering the question, we are also trying to give some comparative view also. You please understand that. Because these kind of mentions, brief mentions in sentences, make your answer very strong, because here you are trying to compare with other philosophers' views also. And in many answers you might have seen, we have compared it. I mean, briefly, because number of words are limited, so you cannot go and devote more number of lines and sentences. But here you see. So these essences are neither mind-dependent entities, as in Plato's realism, nor subjective constructions, as in Kant's transcendental idealism. Instead, they are intentionally constituted within the consciousness while reflecting the universal structures of being, establishing a phenomenological continuity between subject and word. Husserl rejects both naive realism and subjective idealism, asserting that the word's meaning arises from interplay of intentional consciousness and the essences disclosed in experience. Now, this is the exposition. Now we'll go to, because the directive is discussed, so we'll try to briefly critically evaluate also. So critics like Martin Heidegger in Being and Time, this is book, argue that Husserl remains confined within transcendental subjectivism, neglecting the ontological question of being itself. Later phenomenologists like Maurice Merleau-Ponty reinterpret essence as embodied, situated structures rather than purely transcendental. Nonetheless, so this is a brief criticism, and now we'll go to concluding sentence. Nonetheless, Husserl holds that consciousness does not create meaning, but reveals the necessary structures of being, grounding being in how it appears to intentional acts. Now this completes this answer. Now we'll go to C part of this fourth question, which is again a 15 marks question. With we have to write in about 225 words. Explain the nature of two dogmas that Quine refers to in his paper in two dogmas of empiricism. Now, explained word will not give much scope of critical evaluation, but yes, since it is explained, so while explaining, you have to definitely some very briefly about 20% weightage you can give to critical evaluation and conclusion. So same thing we have done here, you see now. In Two Dogmas of Empiricism, that is book, Queen critiques two central assumptions of logical positivism. This is very, very direct attack on the question, hitting bullseye, as I keep on telling. So whatever, without wasting any word or any sentence, you are directly attempting the question, but giving very important information. But here we have written the book also, and basically, what are the two central assumptions from which philosophical stream they have arisen? That also we have mentioned. Now, the first dogma is the distinction between analytic and synthetic statements. This is first dogma, a distinction foundational to Immanuel Kant. So, as I keep on telling, we have to mention other philosophers also if some comparison or some reference can be drawn, because this will give strength to your answer. And later formalized by logical positivists like Rudolf Carnap. Analytic statements are true by meanings alone, synthetic by empirical verification. Queen argues this distinction collapses because synonymy, its basis, cannot be defined without circularity. So this is first dogma or criticism of first dogma. Now, what is second? The second dogma is reductionism, the belief championed by Carnap and the Vienna Circle, that each meaningful statement reduces to immediate sensory data. Queen rejects this, arguing that statements are tested holistically, not in isolation. Knowledge forms a web of belief where empirical revisions affects these systems collectively. Now, this completes with basically these two paragraphs are the critiques of Queen's critiques for two central assumptions of logical positivism. And then now we'll go to a critical evaluation of this exposition. Now, critics contend that rejecting the analytic-synthetic distinction risks collapsing the boundary between logical truths and empirical claims. One philosopher, Strawson, defends this distinction as indispensable for linguistic coherence. Others, like Hilary Putnam, caution that Queen's semantic holism can veer towards epistemic relativism, undermining meaning stability. Nevertheless, now these brief criticism we have included because the directive is explained. So we are not going in very detail, but brief mention we have made. Now, we'll concluding sentence. Nevertheless, Queen's critique decisively dismantles logical positivism boundaries, steering analytic philosophy towards naturalized epistemology, blending philosophy with empirical science. Now, this completes the this completes our model answers and discussion as far as the section A of paper 1 of 2024 UPSC exam is concerned. Next week, we'll try to take up section B of paper 1, that will be of Indian philosophy, and we'll try to see how we can arrive at model answers for the questions pertaining to Indian philosophy, section B of paper 1. So thank you for watching today's video. We'll meet again in next class. Thank you one and all.